In this video, we're going to be changing a tire on a rim the old school way with limited tools. So that means without a tire changer and without a bead breaker. I'll be showing you a couple of techniques to do with bead breaking and a couple of techniques to do with bead reseating. So stay tuned and learn something new. Let's get going. So the first step we're going to be doing is breaking the bead, and that's where the tire seats onto the rim. You would have to break the bead in order to remove the tire. And just like in reverse, you'd have to reseat the bead in order to put air into the tire. The very first thing we're going to do is remove the valve stem. That's this Schrader valve right here. To remove the core from the Schrader valve here, we can use a special tool like this one here. We can put this in and remove it. But because we're using limited tools in this video, we can equally use something like this, a small little metal clip. Just so the pin is on both sides of the small rectangle in there, and rotate to the left. That's going to unscrew the core and the air will come out. Now the core's been removed, it's going to make the entire process of this video so much easier. Now we're going to spray this whole area with soapy water. It doesn't necessarily matter what you have. Soapy water is very cheap. Even Vaseline will work in a pinch, you know. It's what you have. The last thing you want on here is friction. It's going to make your life a lot harder when breaking the bead and also reseating the bead as well. Now we're going to break the bead on this tire now, probably the hardest part of the whole operation. Like anything else with tire removal and replacement, the more money you put into this, the easier it's going to be. That being said, we're doing it the cheap way. So my personal favorite is the drive over. We get a vehicle like this one here and we're going to drive over the side of the tire, except I don't want to drive over it. I want to put something there that we drive up and onto. And when the car is in this position here, it's going to break the bead on the tire against the rim. You can use a 4x4 like this one. With a 4x4, there's a lot of concentrated pressure over just 4 inches. Or a 5x3, depending on the tire you have, how high the tire is, it really depends what you have. This one's quite a simple tire. I think it's going to break quite easily on a 5x3. We get a nice wider surface to drive up. I've made the end slightly curved as well to give our best chance of breaking the bead. This is very useful when working on a larger tire or a tire with a sort of skinnier tire height. And that way it seats up almost perfectly against the rim there, giving us the best chance of breaking this. And if you have a car which is quite low, you can also give yourself a little bit of a ramp so you can easily get on there. Something which is harder to do on a 4x4. So even though it's just a little bit of wood, there's a lot of considerations to think about. We're going to drive up on this tire and see if we can break the bead. So before we drive up here, one consideration: if you have a tire pressure monitor system here mounted on the underside of your Schrader valve, then make sure that is sort of faced away. We don't want to inadvertently damage that when we sort of drive up on here. So right now when we drive up on here, you can see the car is almost driving onto the rim. It's hard to isolate this single piece here. So I'm going to put on one additional block of wood to try and help with that. Okay, so it took a couple of tries. It's not going to work the first time, but you'll probably get there eventually. Because there was a lot of concentrated pressure on one piece, I sort of needed to put a little bit of pressure down here just to get it slipped down. But we got there in the end after around 3 or 4 tries. The bead is broken on this side. I'm just going to flip it over and repeat for the other side. Okay, so before we flip our wheel over, especially if you have a wheel you actually care about, put some cardboard down and then we're going to protect it. Okay, here's another method. Just like there's many ways of skinning a cat, there's many methods of breaking the bead. Now this method involves having something very heavy above a scissor jack that you rotate and it slowly opens up. This could be a car, a trailer hitch, even concrete. But the point is we want to slowly open the jack while the jack is pressed exactly where we need it, right on that rim just there. When using this method, it's very important that the scissor jack stays as close to the rim as possible. You don't want it slipping away or causing harm to yourself, or even harm to your rim, or harm to your vehicle, or anything else. So just like the drive over method, we just need something just to either pry up, or we can put our foot on here and get a bigger amount of surface area going down, and then the tire will eventually fall over inside. Okay, so now the bead's broken on both sides of this wheel right here. Slipping the tire off and pretty much getting it on again is going to be a piece of pie. It's going to be smooth sailing from here. Okay, so now we're going to remove the tire. You pretty much just need 2 strong flathead screwdrivers. If you have something a little better like this, these are actually for a motorcycle. I think they'll still work. The principle is we just want 2 flat pieces of metal and we're going to pry it off. Okay, so removing the first part of the tire is pretty easy. We're just going to get a tool in there and keep our foot steady on there. That way the tire is slightly elevated and we can get another tool in there and slowly work the tire off. We're just pretty much going to go all the way around the tire and slowly work it as we go around. There is a bit of a trick to protect your rim. I'll cover it in a second in the video. And the last thing is to be mindful if you have a tire pressure monitor system as well. We don't want to crack it or damage it in any way. Alright, that wasn't too bad. I wouldn't say there's one almost certainly correct method of removing a tire. As you can see, it's pretty much like an art form. You have to look for gaps and sort of abuse them where necessary. But we got the tire off. So now we're going to put the tire back on again because we're going to show you how it's done. So when putting a tire back on, I'm sure you have a different one. You're not going to put the same one on again. Some tires are bi-directional, and what that means is they have to go on a certain way because of the tread pattern. This is a unidirectional tire, which means I can put it on that way and I can put it on that way. If you're not sure, the tire should say inside or outside, so just double check that before mounting the tire. Okay, so when mounting the tire onto our rim here, we're going to be mounting from the front here, so we're going to have the front facing up. And that's because if you look at the rim, there's a well, or what's called a drop center in the middle. You can see it's slightly off to one side, which makes mounting on this way a lot easier than from the back right here. And this is designed so the tire doesn't fall off while driving, so it's kind of like a nice safety feature here. So just like before, when we remove the tire, we're going to be spraying soapy water pretty much everywhere. We want to give ourselves the best chance of getting this tire on, and that includes on the tire as well, outside, inside, wherever you can. Friction is our enemy here, so make sure it's nice and covered in soapy water. So the first part's pretty easy. You can pretty much just press it on, walk it on, push it on. There's lots of videos where people throw it on. So we pretty much just need to work it on with our hands, with our feet, whatever you have. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Now the slightly tricky part. Now before I put the rest of the tire on the rim here, let me tell you about these cool things. These are called rim protectors. The idea is you put it on the rim to protect them from scratching it with screwdrivers, pry bar tools, and anything like that. Even though we're not using fancy tools like these and these, I'll link them in the description below so you can check them out and try and make your life easier. So the rim protector pretty much just pushes onto the rim here, and you can sort of pull it away when you're done. And that way when you get the tire on, you're not going to be scratching your rims. I guess it only really matters if they're alloys or rims you care about. This one, I don't really care about at all. It doesn't matter. I'm just introducing you to them so you know they exist. Okay, so the second side of the tire, depending on the height of the tire and everything else, this may be a lot harder for some than others. You can almost walk some of them on. You can put a foot on either side and slowly walk it on. I think this is actually a little bit of a stubborn tire. I don't think we're going to be able to do that today. So we're just going to use a couple tools or a couple flathead screwdrivers to slowly work it on. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is spray it down with soapy water. We want to give ourselves the best chance of getting this back on. So all the way around. Now, depending on the size, the shape, the material, the dimensions, everything of your new tire, this is going to either be very easy or almost impossible. If you're on the sort of almost impossible section, you may need an extra pair of helping hands. It really depends on the tire. Having tried with this one, it's quite difficult. So, I do have an extra pair of helping hands, and that are these right here. Now, I could put this on with some screwdrivers, but it's getting to the point where the bead is ripping and I don't have enough body weight to push this down right here. Speaking of pushing this down right here, let me explain. So a lot of people get themselves in this situation. They'll have a last and final bit to get back onto the rim, but it just will not budge for love nor money. You can put in all the force you want, but it will not go. And what can happen if you force it, you're going to rip the bead here, and then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're going to need bead sealer or maybe even a new tire. But there is a trick to this. You push down on the opposite side as hard as you can. The idea is you want this section of this tire, the one not on, you want it pushed down. And that should give you the extra material and leverage to get this over the lip. This shouldn't be hard to get on. It should be a little tough, but it shouldn't be ripping when you try to scoop it on. So the key here is to push this downwards to give you the extra room. If you really can't get it on, then I recommend a set of these. They're only about $10, but sometimes you need something very small to help you. We're not talking about tire changing machines. We're talking about a small helper. This will allow you to push the tire down in all the areas to get it on with no problems at all. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take the tire like this. We're just going to put it at a slight angle and push one side in. Then we can get our knees on here. I'm going to take one of these, insert it like this and rotate it. Could be a screwdriver, in which you won't need to do that. Okay, so I've got a bit of this. So this can be like an extra pair of hands. It could be your friend's hands, it could be your friend's foot. I don't have any friends, but I do have these. These are only $10. The idea is you push the rim into this section right here. So I'm going to take this and push it down. This does two things. The main thing it does is push the tire downwards. This will give us some extra slack on our almost impossible to put on bead. And the same applies on the other side. The other thing it does, it sort of maintains our progress. These will take the place of our knees on the tire. So we're not going to need to put our knees on here and put down body weight we might not have. Perhaps if you weigh 300-400 pounds, this is going to be a lot easier. So this is key here. The point is this side needs to be low. You can see all the space we have here, and this is going to give us the extra purchase to get this over the rim. Like I say, this could be a friend's hands, friend's feet, but these are helping hands, and they'll be our hands today. And like I said, this will not apply to every tire. This will apply to stubborn tires, or you know that one person in the comments that says, well, why don't you try it on this tire? Believe me, this is probably one of the hardest ones I've worked on. Voila. Okay, so the final thing we need to do with this wheel here is to put air into the tire, but because we broke the bead here, when we try and inflate this, all of our air is escaping over the rim as well. So how do we prevent this? Well, I'm going to try and air this up with a simple compressor. It plugs into the cigarette socket of the car over there. It's not very powerful, it's very crap, but we're going to see if we can inflate this with a couple of tips I'm going to show you. So tip number one is to leave the valve core out of the shroud valve right there. We want to get as much air in there as possible. If that doesn't work, it's probably because the gaps here are too big. We need to fill these gaps somehow, or at least make the gaps disappear. Sometimes what you can do is rotate the tire and bounce it around. And that should push the tire back onto the rim here, just enough for you to inflate it. I think that actually worked a little bit right here. Another technique you can do is use a ratchet strap. And what the ratchet strap will do is it's designed to put a lot of compression over the center of the wheel here. So we're going to have our ratchet strap going around the wheel. And what that's going to do, it's going to almost crush the wheel in the center, making the tire spread out. And then when we air this up, the rubber is going to be pressing against the rim, causing a nice tight seal, and then the bead will break as we slowly start to inflate it. If you don't have a ratchet strap or have something similar, you can just coil it in a flathead screwdriver like this and add in your own tension like this. You might ruin your item, but it might give you the purchase you need to get your tire back on the rim in an emergency. So while the ratchet is taut on there, it's putting pressure around the middle, so we're going to run the compressor while it's still attached and while it's being compressed. Okay, so it looks like nothing is leaking out the bead anymore. I believe this bead will pop if I run the compressor anymore, but what's the fun in that? I'm going to show you another method if you're getting stuck with this one, and this method will always work, guaranteed. Okay, the second method we're going to be talking about is creating a vacuum inside of the tire. It's pretty much going to do exactly what the ratchet strap did, but it's going to do it a lot quicker and it's going to be a lot more fun as well. We want to spray something flammable inside of the tire here. I'll cover that momentarily. It could be WD-40, it could be brake parts cleaner, carb cleaner, starter fluid, anything flammable. We're going to set fire to it, create a vacuum, and then the tire is going to reseat on the bead. Okay, there's only two things you have to worry about here. Number one, you need to spray this inside of the tire, not around the edge, not on top. And you need to push it down with your hand, get it inside there, And that's all you need. You don't need any more. Just a little spray like that. You can maybe work it along the edge, but as long as it's inside, it's okay. And then we're going to use a trailing path. And then we're going to set fire right here. Now you need to do this relatively quickly before it starts evaporating. A little spray inside, a little trail spray here, and we're going to set fire to the trail here. The trail is going to carry the flame inside the tire, a vacuum will be created, and then the bead will reseat. For this process, do not put the valve core stem back in that shroud valve there. We want the air to be able to go back in after the vacuum. That way we don't need to instantly attach a compressor and start compressing air into here. It is not needed at all. So you notice when the bead broke, a vacuum was being created. You notice this didn't get sucked inside because we removed our valve core. That is the most important part of that process. And now before we finally air the tire up, we can put the valve core back in and just snug it up, just like that. One of the advantages of using the explosion method is that now you can use even a foot pump to air the tire back up. You're not going to need a powerful compressor in order to force the air in quickly. Okay, and that is how to change your own car tire at home with limited tools. Don't forget, you will need to get this wheel balanced as well. If you want to learn all about wheel balancing, I'll link a video in the description below. You can check it out and learn all about static and dynamic wheel balancing. If you are brave enough to do this yourself at home, let me know how it went in the comments below. We'd love to listen about your story and which sections you had trouble with. Okay, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos coming soon, just like this one. Take care. And for those of you that say you can't do this with a truck tire, hold my kielbasa. Under a very small smart car, look at that.